Hey everyone, thanks for joining me here for volume 40. I know I normally get straight into the stories, but bit of an announcement. I've finally set up some merch. There's some cool stuff on there, so if you feel like bearing the skull on your person somewhere while supporting the channel, go check it out. I'll put the link in the description. If you do, I'd love to see some snaps of it out in the wild, so make sure you share and tag me. Also, shameless plug, there's a lot of stuff over on the Patreon. The lost tapes which are uploaded there is currently up to episode 24. It's definitely not going to be for everyone, since most are too hot for YouTube, given its unrestricted nature. But you also get early access to episodes that's ad-free via podcast feed, along with shoutouts and direct chats. I also have plans to add some extra things soon. So if you want to check it out, again, I'll put the link in the description. So with that said, it's great to see you here for volume 40, and enjoy today's video about people's real spooky Airbnb experiences. To start off, I'd like to say that nothing like this has ever happened to me or my boyfriend, and the two of us were more on the non-believing side before it happened. We still can't believe, process, or understand what happened to us. My boyfriend and I were on vacation in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, staying at an Airbnb on St. Mary's River in Sault Ste. Marie. It was an older 3-bedroom house with its own nice private beach, and we had the entire place to ourselves for the night. We started off the night by leaving to get some food, playing Monopoly, going swimming, etc. Nothing out of the ordinary occurred. As soon as it got dark, we went out to smoke before we ate the food we had just bought. We went back in, had our dinner, and went to the master bedroom. We were both on our phones when the light on the ceiling fan started to flick on and off. I said that the house was old and suggested we turn the lights off. He said no, and that we should keep it on. This is when he first told me that he had a bad feeling. I walked out the hallway to the living room to see if I could sense the energy he was feeling, and he followed me. I felt as if nothing was wrong and went back to the bedroom. He stayed in the hallway, staring at the closed bedroom door. I asked why he was staring at it, and he said, "I swear I just saw the light in this room turn on and off." I was more concerned about a person being in this house, and I said we needed to go in there and look. We walked in, checked under the bed and in the closet, and nobody was in there. He became really startled, and I was just really confused. He said that the dresser had just been shaking really aggressively against the wall. I was skeptical since I hadn't seen it myself, but I said I believed him, and we left the room. After we were back in the living room, he said, "I have a really bad feeling like something bad is going to happen if we stay here. We need to get out of here." We had nowhere else to go until the next day, and I didn't want to leave, but I agreed that we'd go for a drive, come back after, and get our things, and leave if he still felt the same way. After we finished driving, we went back into the house, and he still had this bad feeling. I still didn't want to go, but I agreed that we would get our things and leave. We walked into the master bedroom first, and the light switch for the ceiling fan and light was off. We had left it on. My boyfriend said, "This is exactly what I'm talking about. Look at the fan." It was moving slowly in a circle, and as soon as I looked up, it began moving faster, but inconsistently, as if someone was batting at it. The light began to flick on and off again. Mind you, the switch is still off at the wall. This was enough for me to start freaking out, so we grabbed everything out of there and the master bathroom and got the hell out of that room. Next, we went to the kitchen to do our dishes, since this is a requirement for checkout. My boyfriend reached into a drawer, pulled out the biggest knife in it, and turned his head to look at me. He said nothing, and put the knife down and closed the drawer. I assumed he was trying to show me that it was there in case there really was another person in the house. He started visibly freaking out, and I asked what was wrong. He said, "I'll tell you in the car." We packed up, locked the house behind us, and hit the road. I asked him what he had been so afraid about, and he said, "That thing was talking to me the entire time. It got control of me when I reached for that knife, and it told me to stab you. I had to stop myself and fight it." He continued on saying that he had been listening to these things the whole time, such as, "Hit her," and "Pick up that chair and throw it at her." Hearing this made me sick to my stomach. We ended up sleeping in my car at a rest stop, and neither of us slept well at all, with this lingering awful feeling. Nothing has really happened to us since, so I don't think it is attached to us or anything, but I just can't fathom how it gains that much control over him in such little time. As for the Airbnb owner, I did reach out and text her and ask if anybody had noticed any paranormal activity in the home. She said no, and that this was the first she'd heard of it. I suggested that she have the house cleansed, but I don't really think she was a believer, because she just said, "Wow, I'll definitely look into that." I didn't really want to go into details of what happened, because honestly, I don't think she would have believed me. Okay, so it's around July time 2019, and I'm going on holiday with my friend's family. They're a big family consisting of my friend's mum, dad, their newly adopted daughter, and their son who is my friend. And they also brought my friend's uncle and 2 grandparents. They were only set to travel about 3 to 4 hours in the car in total, but they had a newly adopted daughter who was about a year old at the time, so it was convenient to stop halfway through the journey to stay overnight at a halfway house type place. Well, they had found a place on Airbnb, and it was a pretty good price for the size. And you have to remember, it had to fit 8 of us, as well as 2 dogs. The house was a 17th century style house. High ceilings, wooden floors, small doorways, weird layout, multiple levels, and big wooden beams in the upper areas of the house. This is in the UK, and the house, if I remember correctly, is located on a farm in northern Somerset. Everything was cool during the evening as we settled in. It was only during the night things got weird. I'll describe the events in the order that I experienced or found out about them in. First of all, my experience was something I don't think is as creepy as the other ones that we supposedly had that night. Where I slept was laid out very weirdly. The room was very long, left to right, but not at all deep, and had a sloping roof, almost as if you were in a loft or attic of a normal house. There were 2 double beds, with the bottom of the bed pointing towards the sloping roof, so the headboard of the bed backed onto a kind of walkway to get around the room. Directly above my bed was a skylight, which had no blinds to cover it, and at night, the black sky meant you could easily use it as a mirror. It was nice to fall asleep to at first, but during the night, I woke up to a breeze, which I didn't find weird at first, as these old houses sometimes do have drafts, so it didn't bother me. I looked over to the alarm clock, which read something around 3 AM, if I remember correctly. I felt another breeze, as if someone was moving behind me, and I look up at the skylight to see something almost running past the back of my bed towards my friend. So I reacted fast and looked over at him to see what the hell it was, and there was nothing. At the time, I thought I was just being an idiot and brushed it off, rolled over, and fell back asleep. It was only in the morning when I told my friend's family that things lined up, sort of. At the breakfast table the next morning, I told them about what had happened. And first of all, my friend's uncle explained that multiple times during the night, he heard footsteps and what he described as the sound of me and my friend playing table tennis during the night. We both said that we hadn't been up at all and that we hadn't been playing table tennis. The reason he assumed we were doing this was because there was indeed a table tennis table in the room down the hall from us. He also told us that he had heard laughing and talking amongst ourselves, and he even texted my friend to shut up and go to bed. Then my friend's mum comes and sits down, and without hearing our story, instantly starts telling us how she heard similar noises, as well as a voice from her bedroom, which she said sounded undeniably like her other son, who unfortunately passed away in 2012 when he was young. She also recalled her daughter pointing to where she thought the voices were coming from whilst she was inside her cot. After breakfast, we never really spoke about it again, but I brought it up to my friend the other day, and he says he remembers it vividly, even though he didn't experience anything himself. Even whilst telling this story, I still get the chills. If anyone is interested, the house is located at a place called Yard Farm, which is nearby a town called Taunton in the UK. So my friend, we'll call her A, and her boyfriend, J, were living in Bath, England at the time, and her sister, Mum, and stepdad, total skeptic by the way, came to visit them and got an Airbnb. They decided to stay there with them for a little staycation. The first night they were there, her sister was in the bathroom one night and could hear a woman sobbing outside the door. Thinking something was wrong, she leaves the room to find that everyone is asleep. All the lights are off, and no one heard the woman sobbing except for her. This happens multiple times while they're staying there, only to her sister. As I mentioned, her stepdad is a total skeptic and never wants to believe that anything is paranormal. The way the house is set up, the bedrooms are on the ground floor, the kitchen and living room are directly above, and the bathroom is off the staircase landing. In the middle of the night, late, like 3 or 4 a.m., A hears loud footsteps go from the living room to the kitchen. She thinks, that's weird that someone's still up. The footsteps then go from the kitchen to the bathroom and back to the living room. She thinks that it has to be her stepdad because his footsteps are the loudest. In the morning, she asks him, "Why were you up so late last night? I heard you walking around at like 3 o'clock. He says, "I thought that was you." A and J have their own bedroom. The first night, they close the door and go to bed, and a few minutes later, the door flies open. It doesn't creepily creak open. It deliberately flies open, like someone is pissed about it being closed. This happens every night. On the last night, when it happens, A almost doesn't care anymore, but J becomes extremely startled and tells A to look at the door immediately. They both see a disembodied hand holding the doorknob. They both saw it there, and it stayed there as if someone was staring back, until whoever's hand it was eventually walked away. Later, when she was telling a friend about where they stayed, she said, "I know that place. Was it this address?" And A said it was. Not only was her friend familiar with that house, but she had known someone who was a housekeeper and had worked there before. They said that they would never, ever go back there because it was haunted as hell. This is 100% true. A and J are the realest people I know. Her stepdad is still a bit skeptical, but is officially terrified of this house. So I was going to my sister's graduation at Binghamton University, and my family rented out a well-priced Airbnb for 2 nights, the only one that had 5 bedrooms because extended Chinese family. It was a Victorian-era house, completely decked out with Victorian American aesthetics. Trinkets, paintings of serious children, photos of even more serious people, ornate floral wallpaper, and dolls, many dolls. We were picking out bedrooms, and no one in my family wanted the room with the creepy dolls. I'm not superstitious, and I didn't see the room, and I didn't understand the gravity of the situation. So I was like, sure, I'll take the room with the dolls. You see where this is going. As midnight approached, I got tired, even after being energized by an espresso, so I was the first to go to bed. I went into the room and saw the dolls. They were locked inside a glass case, all facing the bed. I was like, okay, don't be silly. Also, you're a brave trans girl, and they're probably more afraid of you than you are of them, because you're something they've likely never encountered before. Silly thoughts. I decided to take out my black ebony-handled Opinel pocket knife and sleep with it at my nightstand, so I would have some protection. I watched YouTube for a while, turned off the lamp, and went under the covers. I felt the dolls staring, but my rational side told me that it's all in my head. By 3 a.m., I was half conscious, slipping in and out of pure unconsciousness. While I was in a dreamlike state, I was aware of everything going on around me. The dolls staring. Were they next to me? I was afraid to open my eyes. I blinked, and I thought, it's okay, I have protection. I didn't dare look at the ebony-handled knife on the nightstand. I was afraid I'd see a doll next to me. Then I remembered, statistically, armed victims of assault tend to have their weapons taken away and used against them. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be stabbed to death. Then I heard vividly, in a playful, childlike voice,
"It would be my heart's desire."
I immediately became alert, like R2-D2 rebooting after being in low power mode. Adrenaline rushed through me. I heard a ringing in my ear as my awareness went from 0 to 60 in a split second. I stayed like that until the sun started to rise at around 5 a.m. That was when I fell asleep. When I woke up, I dreaded having to sleep there again for another night. The next night, I thought, you know what? Violence begets violence. So I slept with my pocket knife in my bag instead. I fell asleep and slept through the night. This was last year when my family and I went on a road trip in Virginia to see the Blue Mountains and a hiking trail. It was a good deal my mother had gotten, and really wanted to go on a road trip and do some sightseeing, as it had been a while since we all went on a trip together. My mum brought our little dog since she didn't feel like paying for anyone to watch her. The Airbnb we stayed at was like a cabin apartment in an area up in the mountains. It was a whole bunch of cabins with 4 apartments in each one. They all looked really nice and definitely had a great cozy theme to them. The day we got there, nothing seemed off whatsoever. We noticed that my mum's dog kept wanting to go outside and didn't want to stay inside so much. We thought it was because of the new area and change of scenery, so we didn't pay it any mind. My mum and I decided to keep all the windows closed in the cabin because the air at night, being so high in the mountains, is freezing. That night while my mum was sleeping, she left her door open. This is so that her dog could walk around. Sometimes the dog would visit me at night to check up on me before returning to my mum to sleep. She did that once that night. However, she looked scared to enter my room. I told her to come on, and she quickly came in, let me pet her for a second, before returning back to my mum. She's a bit of a playful dog, so I assumed she wanted me to play with her, not pet her. Maybe about an hour after, the door to my mother's room slammed shut extremely loudly. The dog barked, but I also heard my mother get up from her bed, so I assumed maybe she closed the door out of anger because the dog kept on walking in and out. The next morning, my mum told me she woke up last night to the door slamming shut so loudly in her ear and asked if I did that. I said no, I thought you closed it. She said no, but after it slammed like that, she locked it because she got scared, especially after the dog barked and looked angry. I was a bit nervous when she said that, because what are the odds of a ghost being in an Airbnb? So I shoved it off and we headed out for the day. That night, my mum told me she's locking her door before she went to bed with the dog, and I just shrugged and said, okay, good night. I cracked my door open as a habit because of the dog, and I was woken up by my bed, shaking. When I woke up, I saw the door opened up all the way, and I said, come on girl, it's okay. And the dog didn't show up. I say it again. Then I finally remembered, my mum has the dog this whole time. I froze in my bed, because who the hell just swung open my door? I was frozen for a good few minutes, because I had to get up and lock my door. Before I even had the courage to do so, the door slammed shut, just like my mother's did, and I completely freaked out. I jumped out of my bed, opened the door, and knocked on my mother's door. I was panicking, and my mum, really tired, just told me to calm down and go back to sleep. I barely could. I locked the door and just laid back down. After a few hours, I heard loud moving sounds from the cabin below, and I was wondering who would be moving things around at this hour. The next morning, it was time for our short getaway trip to end, and I asked my mother if she heard the people downstairs last night, and she told me that there wasn't anyone downstairs. I was done at that point. I literally packed my bags so fast and just waited for my mother in the car to drive home. The parking lots are numbered with each apartment number, and yes, the whole time we were there, the parking lot number to the one downstairs was empty. So no, there actually was no one below us. Also, the windows in the cabin were closed the entire time of our trip. There was no air coming through, no draft, no air conditioning, nothing. Nothing that would push the doors open and closed like they had been. On a side note, I definitely told my mother to contact the host about the place being haunted, but she said no because it'll make us look stupid. Maybe she's right, but that stuff definitely scared the hell out of me. I've had many experiences throughout my life, and the odd time in a foreign country, I'll have an experience unlike anything I've ever experienced back home, but it's very rare. I'm currently in Prague, Czech Republic, and I've been here since the end of October. I usually rent an apartment whenever I travel, think Airbnb, home away, etc. Within the first few days in my apartment, my cousin, who also has experiences back home, sent me an article about lemons. Maybe you've seen this floating around the internet. The trick is to place lemons where you have unexplained activity, and if the lemons turn green and moldy, they have absorbed the negative energy, or something to that effect. I didn't pay much attention to it, but I did buy lemons for cooking with, and within 72 hours, they had turned green like I had never seen before. Could be just a bad batch of lemons though, right? The following week, I was waiting for the shower to heat up, one of those instantaneous water heaters, which seems to be common in Europe. As I was watching the water run, a black blob of shadow, about the size of a large grapefruit or small melon, came out of the shower head and fell on the floor. Picture dropping a grapefruit. It was similar speed you would expect a grapefruit to fall, and with a similar splat ending when it hit the ground. When it landed on the shower floor, it seemed to morph or melt in its circular-like shape into liquid form and slithered down the drain. And 2 weeks ago, I was laying in bed reading. I'm a bit of a night owl. Thankfully, I found Reddit. I looked up from my iPad, and a white mist was floating over me and going out the bedroom door. I've never seen mist before, but I have been attacked by a bubble-like entity that would hover over me when I slept and strangle me. This mist was very white, very light moving. It didn't seem ominous at all. I rolled over to tap my husband to wake up. Not that he ever sees any of this, and does not like that I believe in it. And there were massive white wings flapping over his side of the bed. They were absolutely stunning and beautiful. I could see the feathers in such great detail, but I couldn't see where the wings joined each other, or what they were attached to. The wings started to ascend and went up to the 12-foot ceiling and disappeared. Between reading and surfing on my iPad, I was silently talking to my mother, who passed away 2 years ago. We were in Prague for a type of fertility treatment that isn't offered in our home country. We have been trying for almost 6 years, and have done IUI, IVF, etc. I was begging her to finally let this time be our time. I rarely receive signs from her, which I find frustrating, because this woman, when her dad passed away, she could literally command a sign at any time, and her dad would send one, so I was always upset when she wouldn't do the same for me. Was this my mum? Was this incident with the mist and wings her? We found out that this week we are indeed pregnant. One thing I find most intriguing about this apartment, though, is a locked room. It has a sign on it saying, private. I'm nosy. I tried all of our keys, and naturally, they didn't open the locked door. It's an old door, with an old-style long skeleton key lock. During the day, I can look through the keyhole into the room, and there has to be a window because the room is super bright. Initially, I thought the owners used it as storage, extra bedding, cleaning supplies for when cleaning between rentals, etc. But it's not. It's a child's room. There's bunk beds and other furniture. This creeped me out. It looked relatively untouched, and that it could be used at any time. Now I'm wondering if something happened here, and the owners are renting it out because they can't part with these memories. I could totally be reading too much into it, but maybe these experiences aren't related to me, and are related to the apartment. I'm happy these experiences weren't terrifying. It's been so quiet for me the past while. I was quite shocked when things started to pick up. So, 2 friends of mine and I went to Nashville to watch a football game a few weeks ago. We stayed at an Airbnb that we had never stayed at before, but it was a good deal, and we all had our own bedrooms. The first thing we noticed was a door in the middle of the hallway that was not a bedroom. It was a door to the basement. The walkway down was as creepy as one could imagine. It looked like something out of The Conjuring, with stone walls and rickety stairs. My friends thought it was a little creepy, but I got an immediate feeling of uneasiness and discomfort. The hair on my arms stood straight up as my friends decided to go down into the basement and look around. The next thing we noticed was that the door would not close. There was no latch and no way to keep the door closed, so we decided to put a basket in front of the door to keep it shut. We went to the game and then out afterwards and got back to the house around 2:30 a.m. The door was closed, but the basket was pushed away from the door by about 5 feet. My friends didn't think much of it in their drunken state, but this really did not sit well with me. I begrudgingly went to my room to go to sleep, making sure to lock the door behind me. I woke up around 8 a.m. the next morning and heard the doorknob to my room slowly turning. The door being locked, it wouldn't open, and I figured it was my friends trying to get me up for breakfast. Then, I hear a very distinct shh come from the other side of the door. Not thinking it was anything other than my friends, I just went back to sleep. About an hour later, my friends got back from breakfast and I got up. I asked them why they tried to open my door this morning and were shushing people. They both looked at me confused and asked what I was talking about. They were very adamant that they did not try to open my door and they did not shush anyone. So, what do you think? Joking friends or something more sinister? A little background on the house I stayed in. The house was built in 1929 for the workers who worked in the copper mine in small-town northern Arizona. It's a very historic town, but only has a handful of people in it. I like the town because it's so empty. The house is cute and small, and is basically a square house with 4 rooms that all connect. The dining room, bedroom, living room, and kitchen. I was there on business. So on the first night, I was watching TV before bed in the living room. And all of a sudden, the window to my right starts rattling as if someone was shaking it. It felt like 5 to 10 seconds, so pretty long when you're startled and scared. I was staring at the curtain as the window was shaking behind it, but froze up to go check it out. I know it wasn't the wind because it was extremely windy all day, and that was the first time any windows made any noise at all. It was extremely loud and consistent the whole time it was shaking. It was only this one window. So I got super scared and froze and didn't even move for a long while. I was looking around and really couldn't explain it, but I was seeing stuff move, like air was moving, but only in the dining room. There was air moving in all sorts of directions in there. I saw things in the corner of my eyes, but when I turned, nothing was there. I figure I was just being paranoid, and I probably was. It was just a very sensitive environment. I knew I had to sleep there that night, so I tried to brush it off, but was obviously still scared a bit. I finally got the courage to get up and go to the bed, and I called my boyfriend to keep me company. I had to wrap around through the bedroom, to the kitchen, to the dining room, to lock the back door. There was no way I was setting foot in that room, so I took the long way round. I honestly was too scared to even check the back door in the dining room. I checked from a distance to see if the door was locked, and it looked like it was, so I just let it be. I convinced myself I locked the door right after my run. Spoiler alert, it wasn't locked. I left all the lights on for bed, and honestly didn't move my eyes off the phone until I passed out. I woke up the next morning, and everything was fine, and I felt like I freaked myself out from it just being an old house and stuff. I came back the next day after work around 5:30 and started making dinner. I sat down in the dining room to eat, and as a joke, I was taking a Snapchat photo of the kitchen and began typing, "So Airbnb I'm at is haunted." Right after I took the photo, Snapchat thought I took a picture of someone's snap code, and that automatic pop-up and noise happened to add a friend on Snapchat. I was typing so fast I didn't see what it said. All I know is I hit the button and it added whoever popped up on the screen. I started cracking up like I just added a literal ghost on Snapchat, lol. The fact that Snapchat recognized something was there was enough to make me freak out a little bit. Then I remembered how easily spirits can mess with technology and was convinced that something was messing with me. So I posted to my Snap story about what was happening. When I was taking pictures in the dining room, the window specifically, the camera was glitching out slightly, like my phone was seeing what I saw the night before, that the air was moving. To the right of the window and curtain, it was very noticeably vibrating or swaying back and forth on my camera. Honestly, at this point, I thought it was cool and tried to freak myself out. I just took the photo of the window and went about eating my dinner. I texted my friends what was happening, and then it just started getting really weird. At this point, I feel like the spirit noticed I acknowledged it, enough to the point where it actually began to mess with me, and it all went downhill from there. I started to feel heavy, and as time went on, I realized that I probably wasn't going to feel comfortable in there once the sun went down, so I decided to pack my bags and find somewhere else to stay. I felt like the spirit knew what I was doing, so they turned up the energy in the house. As soon as I decided to myself that I wasn't going to stay there any longer, I felt paranoid and heavy, and I felt like my eyes were convulsing in a way and seeing energy move, like the night before. I can't really explain it. I felt like it could have been a house full of people, but it was just me. It felt really loud in my head, and I turned on music because I didn't want to hear unusual sounds and get freaked out. The bedroom was dark because I had all the curtains shut, but I was too scared to go into the dark room. I took my phone and tried to turn on the flashlight. The flashlight button was blacked out, like when your phone is dying and it won't let you turn it on. And again, I realized it was messing with my phone again. I turned on the bathroom lights to add some light into the bedroom so I could run to the light switch in the bedroom. I snapped the whole process of me packing and opening doors because I was too scared. I took more pictures but didn't notice anything weird about them like I noticed in the dining room. But then again, I stopped looking for more things to freak me out. So I packed my suitcase and put it on the floor next to me and started packing some other items. And all of a sudden, my luggage tag starts to ruffle as if someone was attempting to grab my suitcase handle. I was literally watching my luggage tag jiggle and move, and I could also hear it, so I knew I wasn't seeing things in my head. I start laughing a little bit, like, really? This is real now. Whatever doubts I had about me being just paranoid before, this moment ended after that, and I was legit crapping myself at this point. I wanted to get out of there. I also noticed high-pitched noises when I was in the bathroom that came out of nowhere and weren't there beforehand. I paused my music to confirm they were there. There were a bunch of background noises that seemed to multiply as time went on, and the more I rushed to get out of there, the louder they got, and the louder it was for me mentally, like I wanted to turn my music louder and drown out my own head. As soon as I walked out the front door to my car, it seemed as if it all stopped. Everything was fine. My head was quiet. It was like a portal of energy. I knew I had to go back in a few more times to load up the car, and I literally had to catch my breath and find the courage to go back in. Sure enough, as soon as I stepped in the house, my head was pounding with noise again. it was like walking into another space entirely, where all of a sudden, it was crowded and mentally draining. Since it was an Airbnb, I couldn't just leave the dishes there. When I decided I wasn't going to stay the night there anymore, I compromised with myself and was like, okay, I won't sleep here tonight, but I'll come back tomorrow to do the dishes. But after all that stuff started happening, I knew I didn't want to come back the next day. The dishes were the last trip I made inside, and I literally had to take a breather outside before going back in again, because that's how exhausting it was just to set foot in the house. I finally gather up the courage to do the dishes, and I go into the kitchen, and as I'm starting them, I just start hearing stuff bang around in the laundry room to my right, like as if something fell off the shelf. There was a window in the door, and I honestly felt like someone was watching me back there. I couldn't even look up to see. At my feet, there was stuff happening too, as if the bottom of my jeans were moving, or there were mice running on my boots. I had to check a couple of times to see if there was a breeze, or if my jeans were brushing up against something. Nope. But also, I don't know. Maybe I was actually shaking. I have never done dishes so fast. I got out of there ASAP. Some other things that happened too that may or may not be me just being paranoid, but here they are anyway. When I called my boyfriend to keep me company the first night as I walked to bed, I literally could not turn off the TV. None of the remotes were working. I just told myself to let it go, and as soon as I walked away, the TV shut off. I brushed it off at this point, but looking back, it could be the spirit messing with the technology again. The door to the bathroom was on a slope the night before, and it bugged me how it wouldn't stay open as I was moving my toiletries in there. No big deal, but as I was packing to leave, the door was staying open on its own at this point. Nothing in the house was closing after I opened it. I noticed this at first when I was looking for items in the kitchen. One of the drawers literally did not fit what I just pulled it out of. It's an old house, so I thought nothing of it. But then it happened to the TV stand. The drawer literally did not fit as I tried to close it. I had to leave it open, as if the items grew bigger and wouldn't fit anymore. Even the lockbox would not close correctly, so I couldn't leave the keys in there. I must have messed around with it for a few minutes that morning, so I could just use the lockbox instead of carrying the key with me. Small details, but a little weird that they stopped working. My dreams that night were very vivid, even though I didn't get much sleep at all. I did dream about the house and having a party that there were about 50 people whom I didn't know. My Airbnb host got mad at me in the dream because I didn't tell her, and I had to kick out all these strangers from the house. Again, not strange, but also, why am I dreaming of a bunch of strangers in a house I'm currently in? I was told a long time ago that if you're ever in a haunted house and don't want to be bothered, you're supposed to imagine a door shutting in your head, which closes off communication with the other side. I did this the first night when I went to bed, and honestly just felt so much better, as if a weight was lifted. It didn't last long, that's for sure, but the fact that I felt so much better after doing that was weird. Honestly, some other stuff happened that did not make this story. Overall, it was creepy as hell. The Airbnb was given 5 stars across the board, and all reviews talked about how quaint and cute the place was. Indeed, it's a cute Airbnb in a quiet little town. But honestly, I believe I was the first one to stay the night there alone. I told my Airbnb host that my company sent me back to town for the rest of the week, and I honestly didn't care to get my money back. I'd still recommend it on Airbnb, but yeah, I personally won't be going back. I googled the town to see if there were any ghost stories, and sure enough, the place was littered with them. Apparently it was built on or near an old Indian burial ground. Yikes. Update. The Historical Society in the area confirmed that there was a murder in the house in the 1930s, and that at least 2 people have mentioned activity in the house. I was on vacation in Italy with my parents and my best friend since childhood, who I will refer to as Jack. We were at an Airbnb for the night, and sleeping arrangements were that Jack and I would sleep together in the same bed, and my parents in another, since there were only 2 bedrooms. I go to sleep first, and Jack decides to stay up a while and watch a show on his laptop, sitting at a desk across the room from the bed. This was fine by me because he used headphones, and I fall asleep no problem. I wake up a few hours later in the middle of the night, which is typical for me, and I decide to look around the room a little. The room is very dark, but in the corner of the room by the desk, I can see the silhouette of a man sitting in a chair facing me. Only he has no head. I feel a little creeped out, but convince myself Jack must have fallen asleep in the chair while watching the show, and his head must just be laying on his chest in some weird way that I can't see it. I lay back down and drift off into sleep again. This happens 2 more times throughout the night, with the same outcome each time. That is until the next time I awake. I look over and the silhouette is still there. I begin to lay back down, but my hand lays across onto what would be my friend's side of the bed. It hits a shape in the bed. My heart skips a beat. It feels like my hand has landed on Jack, laying in the bed next to me. Slowly, I work up the nerve to feel what it is, only to anticlimactically discover it's just a pillow knocked ajar in my sleep. I look back one last time at the silhouette, only to find it's disappeared. Freaked out, I jump up and reach over to turn on the lamp at the other side of the bed and frantically look around the room, finding that both the chair and the bed are empty. I have no idea where Jack is, and I'm fearing for my life. I sit, unable to move, for hours until the sun finally rises. I quickly leave the room and rush downstairs to find Jack sitting on the couch watching TV. He tells me he never slept in that room, eventually having decided to just sleep downstairs on the couch. It definitely wasn't him. I would have seen the light of his laptop. According to him, as soon as he got off the laptop, he went downstairs. We stayed in that Airbnb one more night, where I opted to sleep on the couch. I never saw the figure again, but that room freaked me out. This past weekend, my friend Meg and I rented an Airbnb cabin in Felton with the intent to explore Santa Cruz. This was our first time spending overnight in the area. Now, Meg is very susceptible to feeling energies and presences, as she actually practices magic in her own home. Lately, odd things have been happening to us while we're together, and I'm starting to think that both of us being near each other might attract certain energies, or leave us both heightened. We had plans to microdose some mushrooms, but both decided to trash the idea once we entered the cabin. She explained that she felt a weird vibe inside the cabin, not malevolent, but just off. Neither of us felt comfortable doing this there. We decided to check out Henry Cowell Redwood State Park. The hike was beautiful. I was in awe of how tall the redwoods are. I always seem to forget. We start walking near the river, about 30 minutes into the park. Meg is behind me, and I heard her shift her positioning, followed by a small scream. I assumed she saw a snake or a bug, but she told me that she heard footsteps as clear as day running up behind her. Heavy boot-like pounding footsteps, so loud and so close to her ear that she thought she wouldn't have time to move out of the way for them. But when she turned around, that them wasn't. There was nobody there, in fact. There was nobody on the part of the trail around us at all. We head back to the cabin and decide to go to bed around 2:30 a.m. after drinking and talking all night. We were still a little spooked by the feeling of the cabin, so we decided to share a bed that night. It was extremely dark, even with the giant triangle window that looked out into the woods. Luckily, I brought a small plug-in nightlight from home. I ended up having a nightmare that night. In my dream, everything looked as it did before I fell asleep. My nightlight was still plugged in. In the bedroom, there was a mirror on the wall across from me that looked into a dark bathroom next to me. In my dream, in the mirror, I could see a dark figure standing there. Thinking this is all real, I clutch my blanket and try not to look towards the mirror. I assumed that this must be my imagination and tiredness, because I was still awake, I thought. Next thing I know, the bed starts shaking like an earthquake is happening, and I start yelling, "Who are you?" and "What lives here?" indicating my assumption that whoever was in the room with me wasn't human. Then I woke up, grateful that it was just a nightmare. The next morning, Meg tells me that she had a dream last night too. She says that a heavy-set lady walked into the cabin we were staying in, yelling for us to get out now, that we should have been packing up and gone already. There was a strong sense of urgency in her voice. Either we were unwelcome, or something was trying to warn us or protect us. Anyway, the energy was in flux all weekend. I never knew about Santa Cruz's rich history and being the murder capital of America in the 70s. I did some deep diving after arriving home, and found out that a group of boys were murdered a long time ago on that Henry Cowell trail we were hiking on, where Meg heard those footsteps. She wonders if they were one of the boys running away, or if it was Mullins' spirit, the one who killed them. We also found out that 9 years ago, a body of a 20-year-old man was discovered on Zayante Road, literally the street across from where we were staying, and the name of the creek in our backyard. My fiancée, who we'll call B, has really poor foresight and took me on our first date on his dad's birthday, so we share a special day with him. This means that we usually do stuff with his whole family on the actual day, and then go and do our own thing the day after. On our 2-year anniversary, in early November a few years ago, we were doing a family trip to go to the homecoming game at his younger sister's college. Not gonna bore you with the details of our trip, but some relevant stuff. B's sister, gonna call her Elle, goes to Clemson, a well-known ACC school in South Carolina, which is about a day's drive through the mountains from our home state. We're all pretty big fans, and B's uncle got president's box seats for the game as a present for the dad, so it's a pretty sweet deal. This was an expensive trip to a pretty nice little place. We stayed at a little Airbnb lake house for the weekend. The lake house was small, recently refurbished, and had a steep walkway leading to the covered dock. It was super cute, but it felt really sterile and not comfortable at all. Elle and I are sharing a room with their older sister. I'm not with B because we're religious and don't do the before marriage bed thing. I was super excited to use the trip to get to know them more, so we stayed up pretty late after dinner that night talking. The girls went to sleep in their shared bed pretty quickly after we stopped, and I played games on my phone for another 30 minutes. It's pretty standard bedtime. I passed out without noticing. I woke up about 30 minutes later. I read my text messages under my blanket and replied to my mum, who had texted me asking about the drive up. When I poked my head out of the covers, the whole house was dark, except for the main room, which is filled with some pretty solid moonlight from the big French doors that lead out to the porch and dock. I only know this because the bedroom door is wide open when it wasn't before. There was a woman standing in the doorway. It's not one of the girls, and it's not me, and no other ladies were on the trip. She was super pale and very wet, like dripping. She's in a nightgown, like one of those grandma-looking ones from Walmart that are pink and flowery, not a sexy nightgown. I couldn't really move, but it wasn't like the tight chest feeling during paralysis, just fear. I was just looking at the lady in the doorway, and she was saying stuff, but I couldn't hear her at all. It was like she was mouthing things to me. No sound was coming out, and then she was gone. I eventually went back to sleep. There was some panicking and crying involved. And when I woke up again, it was morning. There was no trace of her. Might as well have been a dream. And I would have thought so too, if not for the text I'd sent to my mum at roughly 2:30 a.m. I don't have any explanation for what happened, but it messes with me to this day. If you guys know anything about Clemson Lake drownings or murders or something, I'd love to know more, because I'm pretty sure I saw somebody's ghost, and I kind of want to know who she is.